Oh, yes. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into Snow the Goalie, the only Flyers podcast, the People's Podcast, the Players Podcast, the only Flyers podcast. I'm Russ Joy at Joy on Broad. I'm joined today by two men who, listen, I'm going to tell you right now, we're gonna put the unedited thing that just happened up on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@snowthegoalie. That was a moment that we just shared. I'm joined, as always, by one, Anthony Sanfilippo. Find him on Twitter @AnSanPhilly, and also the I might say the star of the Philadelphia Flyers Charities Carnival, and that, of course, is a man whose hand was cramping by the end of the day, who had so many flashes in his face from pictures that I think he needed a couple of days to recover. And that, of course, is Chris Bundy. Find him on Twitter @CTerrian6. How you doing, you beaut?
I'm doing good. You know, I think we got to introduce Anthony first next week. This is like 4 weeks in a row for me to get the lead off, and we got to send it back to the big fellow over there. He, you know what? I appreciate that. I'm going to actually say Anthony was the star of the show. I mean, when you get yourself into that water tank, and then the president of the team, who, you know, we didn't exactly have like the Elliot and E.T. marriage right out of the get-go, right? Like, it's been a little bit of a, you know, it's not been a kid's story. But Anthony, you know, and I think our group have moved the needle along and getting that little push. You know what she said? I actually texted him the other day, said, you know, good job. Carnival was excellent. It really brought like a lot of years past back. It was great. And she said, you know, Chris, and honestly, that little girl hit the button. And I wanted to make sure that, you know, she was secured with Anthony going in the tank. So, listen, there was a lot of good stuff that came out of that. But I'm giving Anthony the star of the show. Just getting in that tank and getting up repeatedly is a body of work in and of itself. I did it as a rookie in '95. And
just for the fans who might have missed our live stream.
Oh, here we go.
We're gonna throw this up on the screen right now. So you can see the ball. And there's Val Camillo dunking Anthony Sanfilippo into the tank. And listen, that was a moment.
Yeah.
That was a moment.
Yeah, I broke my toe.
Did you really?
Literally.
I did. Pinky toe. Broke my pinky toe. Yeah. Doc said I'll stop feeling it in about 10 days, he said. So,
yeah, it goes away.
Yeah.
I did. You know what? You told us about it, though, Anthony. I actually saw you slide. And yes, it doesn't look it, but you slide right into the front of that thing.
Yep, and that's what happened. My foot hit the front of the thing, and just like on a slight angle, and my pinky toe caught it, and yeah.
Were you wearing water shoes or no?
No, I was barefoot.
Water shoes might have helped you there. Now you know for next year. That or steel toe boots.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Well, anyway,
but it was fun.
That's Anthony Sanfilippo. Find him on Twitter @AnSanPhilly. How are you? Other than the broken pinky toe, which I'm sure we'll hear about for a few weeks. How are you?
I'm doing great, and I two things I want to say. First of all, Bundy, great comparison to E.T. and Elliot.
Yeah.
Because I'm like the E.T. I'm just chasing those Reese's Pieces to find all the bits of information that I need to find, right, to get myself back home. And Russ, the beginning of this thing for all of our listeners, please check out the YouTube feed, because that was one of the funniest unscripted moments we may have had since we started this podcast.
Yeah, that was not, there was nothing planned with that
yes,
at all.
It was completely
we were just waiting to start the show, right?
Yes, and it was visual. It's a visual. It's not something that's auditory. It's visual.
I think this is something that's up there with the time that Bundy went through the, was it the Krispy Kreme drive-through? What was the drive-through that he went through the one time?
Tim Hortons. Yes,
Tim Hortons. That's it. That's right.
Yeah, my Canadian trip. Yeah, I had to go up there and get a Tim Hortons. And I did the order for you guys in the drive-through. And
yeah, that's
an experience. I mean, like I said to Anthony before, you can't swing a dead cat by the tail up in Canada without hitting a Tim Hortons.
That's right.
You know, like turn on every street corner, every other street corner. So it's an experience. It's a way of life.
Yes, it is.
I just wanted to point out to people, and I know that we've said this a few times now. We, of course, are going to keep, at least for the time being, we're going to keep putting up episodes, or at least parts of episodes, on the Crossing Broad YouTube channel. But if you haven't done so already, we have been growing this thing slowly. But if you can, go over to our new YouTube channel, youtube.com/@ you have to use a little @ symbol, @SnowTheGoalie. If you try to just search Snow the Goalie on YouTube right now, you're going to get inundated with like all of our past episodes on the Crossing Broad feed. But do us a favor, go over. I'm going to be honest. I'll just pull back the curtain here for a second for people. We are at least in some way, shape, or form, interested in like trying to monetize this show a little bit, which we would like to do on our own. There are reasons for that, but go over there. That'll help us out. That's a big thing for us. I think you have to get to like 100 subscribers before you can start doing stuff, and I think we're close. So we get, I don't know how many thousands of people that watch it every week on the Crossing Broad YouTube channel. So head over to the Snow the Goalie one, subscribe there, hit the cute little bell or whatever so that you know when a new episode comes out. And yeah, that's that. Guys, there are so many things that have happened, and we briefly touched on a couple of them on the live stream for the Charities Carnival. And by the way, if you listened to that for 2 hours, or if you watched it, or you checked in for 10 minutes on the live stream and then went back and listened to it in the pod feed, we did try to clean up that audio as much as we could. But it's 3 mics in very close proximity and no audio engineer, so apologies if it wasn't the most pleasurable listening experience. But big thank you to those who came up to us at the table, took a picture with Bundy, got an autograph, the person who brought the Daily Times to Anthony to sign, the works. It was really exciting. It was a lot of fun. We got to shake hands. No kissing babies this time, but it was a lot of fun.
Although there was one really cute baby that came over.
Oh my gosh, there was the baby in the carrier, and and they had like the little jersey and Bundy signed jersey.
And the Flyers bow in her hair. Yeah,
and after we got done the live stream, you know, we kind of talked about some of the things that were going on, some of the activities, players, what they were doing, and it makes you kind of feel warm and fuzzy when you see the kids at the carnival having a good time, because Bundy brought up on the live stream that like that ultimately is who the carnival is for. It's for the kids and for that next generation of Flyers fans. And as you and I were walking out, I forget, was it by the Chickies or something? I forget what it was. But as we were walking out towards the F lot or E lot or whatever it is, we saw Owen Tippett playing like oversized Pong with the big inflatable ball in the trash cans with like a probably 13 or so year old fan. You just think about it, and it's like, it was $20 to play, which goes to good causes, right? To the charities. But like that kid's not going to forget that moment. Like that's a really cool thing. And it's also one of the younger players on the team. So that is, I think, just a microcosm of some of those experiences that were made, that were forged. And it's understandable why so many people go year after year after year and take their kids every year, or take their nieces, nephews, fill in the blank, but they take these younger fans to it. And it was a really cool experience. And, big thank you to the Flyers for having us there, and for letting us do the live stream and letting us, do our show there. Despite the fact that, we've been critical in the past. But I think we've done a better job of kind of mending some fences there. And if it took breaking Anthony's pinky toe, then I would say that was a price worth paying.
Thanks. I'm glad I could, I could take one for the team there.
You know what, though? A lot of the things, though, guys, like we talked about, like even before, though, I mean, like I go down to the games and the experience this year. I mean, listen, it's been better crowds. The team has had more of effort. I don't want to beat a drum for 30 minutes doing this, but the game in-game experience down there this year has been great, Anthony. And I mean, I'm not going to say anything different. It's not been over inundated with too much gritty. I think there's actually been just enough gritty where he's there, but not the focus, right? Yeah. There's been more of a refocus on hockey and the product, and it's going to get better, but it's been really, really an enjoyable experience for me going down. And I can safely say to any fans, go. There's only a few games left. Go down there, watch hockey till the end of the year, get a feel for some of the young guys that will be here. And let Danny or whoever that may be, his group, kind of to build this thing out and get that chance to do it. But the in-game experience stuff that we barked about has been night and day compared to some of the stuff we saw. And I wonder now how much COVID had to do with a lot of that too. It's been
a
lot. Yeah.
Came over right at the very end of the podcast when we were done at the carnival. Mike Shane came over to us.
That's right.
And I was talking to Mike a little bit, and really he was saying, it was really the first carnival he got to experience, because he had just been hired when they had the last carnival. That was like he had just started, but he had some kind of loose ends to tie up back at his old place. So he wasn't at the last carnival, but this was the first carnival he was at. And like he even said it, like, they feel like, and Cindy said it on the show, they felt like this was that kind of crowning achievement of getting back to where they wanted to be and where they were before the meltdown that we pointed out and we were talking about. And we were very, like you said, Bundy, we were very critical of for the better part of 2 years, where things were just a mess. they have really rebounded and gotten it back over the course of the last 15 months, I'd say,
100%.
to where it was, and they found the right balance. They found the right balance with Gritty. They found the right balance with communicating with fans. They found a lot of, and yes, there are a lot of things that fans are still upset about as far as the hockey team is concerned, but as far as the experience and how they present everything to fans and offer to fans and things along that line, they've really done a good job getting back. Not everything's perfect. There's always going to be little hiccups here and there. That's just the typical nature of business, right? But it's where they are now to where they were in January of 2022 is a complete 180.
Yeah.
And how could anybody be upset with the hockey team? They're 5-0-1 in their last 6 games. They've picked up some meaningful points. God damn it.
Well, so here's the thing, Russ.
They can't win at the right time. They can't lose at the right time. But you know what? They're building.
That is kind of true.
But you know what? I have to say this. I have been mega tank guy, right? Have been. They are not fielding a team of past their prime players in an effort to tank. They're not fielding a team full of non-NHL caliber prospects to tank. I don't love the results here, right? As a fan, you'll always want to see your team win. But I will say, if you're going to hope and pray that there is such thing as the hockey gods, that they might smile on the Flyers here for trying to do things the right way down the stretch, as opposed to some of the other teams who, quite frankly, are very, very clearly trying to tank down the stretch. So there have been positive signs. We could get into those in a bit if you guys want to. There are a couple of other big stories that I think are probably a little bit more important to get into than this recent run and Morgan Frost's 2 goals against Montreal. But up to you guys if you want to touch on this at all before we get into the one thing I want to the day.
Yeah, the one thing I want to say about it, Russ, and like without really kind of diving into specifics, is that the Flyers right now are the 7th worst team, right? And everybody's like, "Wow, man, they need to get closer, But even if they lost, they were never going to get bad enough to get down to the top 4, right? They just weren't. It's just where they were in the standings. They were never going to get that bad. You could have gotten to 5, and they were at 5 for a little bit, a short period of time, a couple days before this 5-0-1 stretch got them back to 7. The difference between 5 and 7, as far as percentage chance to win the lottery, is 2%.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're going to sit here, like fans upset that they're winning, you're only upset over a 2% difference, whereas the value of being able to look at these players and determine who you want to have be part of the future and who, give them real opportunities to play at the NHL level, mostly against good teams. I mean, Montreal's not a good team, but if you look at who they've been playing a bunch of good teams and winning games against good teams.
Yeah.
Then I think that value is far greater than the 2% difference that you would have if you were losing 5 out of 6, right?
The only way that's not the case, and I've said this a few times now, is it's the 2 lotteries, right, for the top 2, and then it's inverse. The only time that I will disagree, and we won't know until draft day, is if Mishkov falls to 5. If 4 GMs are afraid of him not coming over for a few years, and he's there at 5, and like conceptually, you had the 5th worst record, nobody jumps you. You could have been in that position. That I think is the only place at this point that you go, all right, that sucks. What's that?
Can you see that right there, boys?
That's a roulette wheel.
That's a roulette wheel. So I want to tell you guys how the roulette wheel works and what people think of the roulette wheel. They say just put your money down on black or red. It's 50-50. No. Mm-hmm. The 2 little green guys right there are where the house makes all their money. That's how the game of roulette is won by the casinos. It's almost the same kind of concept where you just throw out the 2%, but that 2% could be everything, right? Like at the end of the day, too, when you're doing so when you get into that lottery, so there's a weird part of it, too. Listen, there's no way to sell any other fact, and you know this, Anthony.
Yeah.
You're in the worst spot you can be in the National Hockey League.
Yes, they are.
And anything between 17 and 25, 26 is the worst land you can be in hockey.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's why I show with the roulette wheel with those little
Yeah.
two, because that's where all those percentages play in, and that's where the house money is made.
I mean, you could be the San Jose Sharks and lose 17 of 20, right?
Sure.
And plummet all the way down into the lottery, having a much better odds, and they actually could, if they keep going the way they're going. Although they did win yesterday, had a shutout against the Jets, who were trying to make the playoffs.
You see the Jets' numbers lately?
I know they're terrible. They're terrible.
I mean,
don't know what the hell's going on there.
Incredible. Scheifele's had 1 point in 3 weeks now.
It's crazy. It's crazy. But if you look at what the Sharks have left on their schedule, they have to play Colorado twice, Edmonton twice, Vegas, and then a road game against Winnipeg, one road game against Calgary, and only one easier opponent, a game in Arizona. The Sharks could well finish below Columbus.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how bad they've been. They could finish below Columbus. So that would be what they're doing, is tanking. That is a tank job and a half, right? To go that bad, lose 17 of 20, knowing you have this brutal schedule at the end as well. So
the other thing, though, too, is like Chicago very clearly showed in the offseason that like the tank was their plan, and they're still a point up on Columbus.
Yeah.
Right. Like they still, despite their best efforts, they are, I mean, they've lost 6 straight, which is going to help, but they're only in the second worst spot. I think the way that this whole thing is played out, and I'm assuming you guys probably see this in a similar way, like despite the fact that like even in Anaheim, horrible, right? Like the fact that some of these teams were as bad as they were kind of speaks to the parity that exists in the NHL, that you can see a team go off and take down another, a team that is trying to actively make their way into the playoffs. And then
look at the Flyers against Florida last week.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's no way in hell that the Flyers, with their stacked against a team like Florida that's desperate, loses a game like that. And then Florida loses to Ottawa the other night, too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, that's been the weird team for me all year, Florida. I'll be honest with you. I'll say this really quick. I didn't mean to cut you off, Russ. If Florida left everything alone, made no trades, even before last year's trade deadline, they win a Stanley Cup in the next 3 years.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the moves that they've made in the last, even going back to the Giroux trade, like I'm telling you right now, I used to ask Bill Meltzer when you see him. I say Florida's a team to me that can win the Stanley Cup. Not anymore. The guy disrupted the entire chemistry. They got a better player back with Matthew Tkachuk than maybe Huberdeau. And to me, he looks like one of those guys right now. It's all individual accolades and hasn't done a whole ton for the team in general at the end of the day, where Huberdeau seemed to be the guy that was forcing the team forward.
Russ didn't want us to bring up Florida because it would point out that his boy Bill Zito has not done a good job.
I mean, I don't know, and I would still argue that Bill Zito has done a better job.
He should have left it alone.
Than Chuck Fletcher did here. Yeah, I mean, like he clearly made a what was supposed to be a splash move last year, pushing all the chips in because they thought that last year was the year. Yeah. So yeah, I still I would have taken Bill Zito over Chuck Fletcher every single day, but we've kind of done this before. Hopefully, Danny Briere becomes better than both of them, right? Because he's your GM. Exactly. Which brings us to
we've buried the lead here.
The biggest story of the week, the biggest story of the year, perhaps, maybe even the biggest story of the decade. Who knows? Dave Scott is out. He is out. He is leaving. He is fading off into the sunset. He's riding off into the sunset. I don't know what you want to compare it to, but Dave Scott is gone. Well, he will be soon. He's set to step down from Spectacor. I believe it's April 7th, but he will step down as the governor of the Flyers on July 1st. Now, the fun thing about this is 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, our own Anthony Sanfilippo wrote a story on crossingbroad.com following the ouster of Chuck Fletcher and noted with some wink winks, some nudge nudge, some speculation here on Snow the Goalie that Dave Scott may or may not be one of the people who could be moved on from in the Flyers organization.
Well,
and
I didn't say maybe. I said
well,
definitely.
you outlined it specifically. I think we tiptoed around it on the pod and then you wrote it in the story.
Yeah.
But it came to fruition. Dave Scott is gone. Dan Hilferty, who was hired a month and a half or so ago in a non-hockey role, had been described, as Bundy noted on the show, I think about a month or so ago, that he had been compared by somebody who worked at Wells Fargo Center as being one of the biggest fanboys in a positive way, being an ultimate Flyers fan. He now takes over as the CEO, I guess, right, of Spectacor. He's taking over that job. It remains to be seen what his influence will be on hockey ops and the Flyers. As of right now, it appears that Val Camillo will remain in her spot on the business ops side. We do need to see what Dan Hilferty is going to do, how he's going to put his stamp on this. But his most important task right now is going to be to go out and hire this new president of hockey ops. So I don't think this came as a surprise, and I think it might make the most sense here, since you're the one who wrote the story and broke it down. Give people an idea from behind the scenes. How did the organization, or how did Comcast, big Comcast, ultimately decide that this is the course of action that needed to go into effect, namely Dave Scott, retiring, or perhaps being nudged a bit to go ahead and retire?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the point here, Russ. And I wrote about it, and we've briefly discussed it on the pod, but I'll say it in a little bit more detail here, in that when Hilferty was brought in here, he was brought in primarily to handle most of the other branches of Comcast Spectacor, including, as we've discussed, also the very important situation that is involving the Sixers and their desire to build a new arena down in the city. And of course, Comcast not wanting that to happen because Spectacor owns the Wells Fargo Center. They want to keep the Sixers as a tenant. So that was going to be Hilferty's first and foremost primary thing to focus on. Worrying about the Flyers was going to be a down the road situation, if at all, because Dave Scott was still in charge. You had what we talk about, the week that beginning, that first week of March, that started with Chuck Fletcher's, actually started on the 28th of February with Chuck Fletcher's first press conference in almost 3 months, where we talked about how he was gaslighting the fans. Then the next night you had the Rangers game where 70% of the Wells Fargo Center was New York Rangers fans. And if you tie into that, what happened with the people at home not being able to watch the game mostly on Xfinity, but also in some other cable providers as well, was not the Flyers' fault, but it doesn't matter. The optics of that was that this is a Comcast problem, right? Because we're not being able to watch it on Xfinity. So that became number two, but it was a big one. It was a big number two. And if you want to make a reference there, it was a big number two as well. And then that goes into the deadline on Friday, where, again, this is more optics than anything else, but the inability for the Flyers to trade James Van Riemsdyk in any way, shape, or form made Chuck Fletcher look incompetent. And therefore, he then has a press conference after that where, he was completely perplexed that people found this to be a problem. And that was an issue. And then on Saturday, you have the season ticket holder event where they boo the hell out of him, right? And so you combine that with the fact that both talk radio stations in town focused on the Flyers that week and just totally tore into them, including the Fanatic, which is their rights holder, right? And then you had a lot of TV stations all talking about the Flyers and their failings and inabilities to do things the right way. And we're talking about, the Sunday night sports shows that, and I was telling Bundy, I went on 2 of them and I told both networks, hey, the other network asked me as well, are you cool with this? And they were both okay with it. Like, it was like, no problem. We don't care. We really want to talk about this. You put all of that together in 1 week and it changed. The light bulb finally went off over there. And they, above Dave Scott, said, we have to do this now. We can't wait. We can't keep stretching this out further. And that's what took place. And so the plan then came in. First, Chuck, and Dave, you have to fire him because he was your guy. So Dave does that, right? And then Dave gets the quote unquote golden parachute to be able to retire on his own without being fired. So he does it. So he gets to save a little bit of face. But then they turn to Hilferty and say, okay, you got to take it. You've got to be the point person now. You've got to be the guy. And that's so he's coming in, and now he's going to be the person who hires that next president of hockey operations, whoever it is. So that's the behind the curtain. It was not the original plan, but it shifted because of a really, really bad week, mostly optically, let's be honest, but a really bad week for the organization, and knowing that they had to do something in the moment. They couldn't wait any longer.
Yeah, that seems to be I mean, Anthony kind of nailed it right there. I don't have a whole lot to say about it, except I will say this. This is really to the fans more than anything. Trust in Dan Hilferty. I'm going to tell you that right now. I'm going to say that. I've met him over the years a few times. He's a real deal type of guy. He was the one, as Anthony said before, and I've read and saw it. He was instrumental in bringing the World Cup here in 2024. He's a major power player. I do think he was initially brought here to salvage the Sixers and that perhaps not moving their building to Chinatown or wherever else in the Delaware Valley that would be a mess, especially in Philly. They want to keep him there. But I think ultimately at the end of the day, I think people realize maybe this we're really lucky to have a guy like this here. Mm-hmm. He knows sports and the fabric of sports. Here's a problem with Dave. No disrespect to Dave at this point. He didn't know shit about sports. He don't know anything about hockey. And when he got placed here, it was Ed Snyder. So there's a timeline to all this, all right? Ed Snyder brought in Dave Scott when Peter Luco left. Whatever happened back in 2014, maybe, Andy, 13?
Yeah. Well, yeah, we can. I'll talk more about that too. Go ahead, Bundy. Yeah. Finish your point. I'll bring that up.
Anyways,
it's a good point you're making. Go ahead.
So they come in. So he replaced Luco, which the organization probably was in never better shape than when those guys had it. Right. Handed it off. Dave came in, didn't know anything about hockey. Essentially, what happened at the same time, Hextall became the GM. Homer handed him that to become president. He'd done with the GM. Hextall came in, ran the GM business here. I was still traveling with the team. A lot of this stuff that went on around the Hexy part before, I don't think had a whole lot to do with hockey, other than it had to do perhaps with egos and other sentiments of the way that people were perceived in the organization and treated. All right, I'm going to leave it at that. Hexy was a friend of mine. He still is. But he was, let's just put it this way, he was a very, very hands-on GM to things that he had no need to get involved in at all. When you start worrying about the toilet paper in the visiting team's locker room, you got a lot of fucking things on your plate that you don't need to be worrying about. All right, let's just leave it at that. All right.
Yeah.
So he comes in, things go on. We have to make a change. There has to be a change that's made because Ron Hextall, we can't deal with this here. And so they made an organizational group decision. There are people, from what I've been told, that went to Homer, went to the top, said, we need to do something here because this is ridiculous how things are going. Hextall, I will say, had a vision, though, in terms of what he thought would work. I thought he sold a load of crap sometimes because I don't think the vision that he had with the players were the same ones I was matching on the ice. The kids are coming. The kids are coming. The kids are okay. The kids came and they're okay. They're all right. So that to me, and so he moves out. So then again, this is how an organization in hockey works because it's a small world. Bob Clark, Paul Holmgren, and mostly those two, not even really Billy. Billy was, and this is true. Billy was Dave's kind of hockey teacher. When he'd go to the games, he'd explain the game to Dave. Dave Scott did not know what a penalty box was when he got here. I'm not kidding you that. I know that for a fact from a friend that said, Dave said, what is that area? And someone said, that's the penalty box. So, but that's not his fault. So what happens is they make a change. Bob and Paul go out. We need to replace the GM. Who are you going to replace him with? So what did they do? They went out and got a Harvard-trained business guy, his assistant GM who went to Princeton. They came in here outside the Flyers family, not from here. Somebody has always handled the mantle down for the next GM, and that's usually your elder statesman in the organization because they know everybody in the business. So that under Bob and Paul, we've had a hockey guy, we've had a non-hockey guy. Neither one of them worked by their standards. Now it looks like we're going back to a hockey guy again with Danny. When Chuck was in here, I think it became pretty obvious to Paul and Bob that, man, this guy ain't getting the job done. Like, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. And then the coach, yes, I think that Bob and Paul suggested that Torts would be the right guy here. I don't think Chuck would have ever wanted a guy like John Tortorella anywhere near him because he's not mentally tough enough to take that. He wanted a soft cream puff in here that he didn't have to deal with, that he could just say, oh, you know what? Everything's good. Did we win? We won. Oh, did we lose? Oh, we'll handle it. No, they went and said, if we're going to flip it and we're going to build back what we'd lost, and that is the fabric of the foundation, then we need a John Tortorella to do that. So that's what happened. Torts came in. Chuck was as incompetent as you could find. Nobody, I'm not disrespecting the man as a person. I would have expected a lot more from the son of a legendary National Hockey League GM, Cliff, a guy that had been around hockey a long time, Chuck. And he was also Harvard trained, right? He knew essentials. That doesn't mean that you know what you're doing when it comes to hockey. I'd rather have an eye guy that does the eye test. But my point to everybody right now is that the Flyers, those people did go outside the organization. They did go to somebody that was a non-hockey person. They went after someone that was an agent. Chuck used to be an agent. He was a former GM. He was working up the turnpike for the Devils. There's a lot of things that made sense. And I'm going to tell you right now, the firing of Hextall was a real problem for a lot of people in the office, because I think they knew it had to happen, and they realized, like, oh man, we made a mistake here, and we've got to literally cut this out right now before it proceeds any farther. The problem is I think when they brought Chuck in, I don't think they realized that he would be as inept as he was. And Anthony, everything Anthony just said there was a culmination of everything just hitting that one thing at the same time. The no trade of JVR. I think the Rangers thing, Anthony, hurt this team, man. Like, that was, to me, what made me sick. And I said it. I was pissed.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of things that kind of bullied up at the end. And I think that's how Dave just said, I got to let him go. From what I understand, there may have been a plan in place to remove him later, but I think Dave may have jumped the shark in the process. But again, I don't support, I'm not here defending Bob or Paul. There's a part of the business. I'm just telling them that they don't deserve the wrath or the ire that some fans are giving them, because they've always done what's best for the organization, or tried to. And yes, I know we haven't won a Stanley Cup since 1975. That's no one's fault. We've had good teams. I mean, if some of the players we've had here over the years would have come into fruition, we probably would have had 2 or 3 parades on Broad Street. It just didn't happen. One team wins every year, but I wanted to make sure people understood that I do believe in what's coming with Dan Hilferty. I think he's going to do a great job here. He understands sports. He understands the fans and the fabric of this town. And that's really something Dave and even Valerie and the people coming here, they don't know that yet. And that's why some of the voices are so important, why our voice was important, to say, hey, we need to get back to the roots, because this is too special of a franchise. And that's why I'm excited about Dan Hilferty coming in here as a knowledgeable sports guy that's going to be somebody that's going to take a genuine interest in this team, because I think he believes and understands what this franchise once looked like, and he wants to return it to that glory it deserves. The league is always better when the Philadelphia Flyers are better. Hockey is a better sport when the Flyers are better. And I've seen that through the years. So that's, I think, in a nutshell, I know what happened. That's where I think we're at right now. And I just wanted to kind of lay that out there, because it's been sitting, I think, at our feet. I think I explained it in the best English. And Anthony, you can feel free to hop on any part of what I just said in there.
It's great. It was a really, really good explanation, Bundy. And that's why I didn't want to interrupt you, because I felt like you were nailing it. The one thing that I just wanted to add to it. Now, it's not even that you said anything wrong, but I just wanted to add to it. When you mentioned Ed hiring Dave Scott, he did. Dave Scott was an Ed Snyder hire. So, it's a shame, because, I mean, Ed did so much right, and obviously that was the wrong decision. But what the situation was at the time, if just to kind of bring everybody back to it, is Peter Luukko was locked in. Like, he was going to be Ed Snyder's replacement. Mm-hmm. It was in stone. It was not even a question. Okay. And then when NBC and Comcast merged, there was an internal audit, and the internal audit was not the greatest look for the Flyers organization, and it resulted in going right to the top, and Peter Luukko was at the top of that list. And again, he publicly left on his own, but I can assure you that there was some pushing out the door. And so Ed then had to make a new decision. And Ed was sick at the time, right? And he knew he was near the end. And it was a situation where Ed really didn't have the opportunity to go out and find the right person. He took a recommendation
he was retired
Comcast.
too. Remember, Dave Scott was retired.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes, he was retired.
Yeah.
It was a recommendation. And so he met with Dave and, okay, Dave, you were a good business leader. And I think that Ed's impression at the time was that this was not going to be a 9-year situation where Dave Scott was running the Flyers. I think Ed thought when he brought Dave Scott in that it was just going to be a transitional period until they found another person that could kind of be that chairman who had that passion for the Flyers, who had that desire to see the team succeed. And it turned out that they just left him in place, and that person was never found, which is the Dan Hilferty situation. Like, Dan Hilferty is that guy. If they would have just found him, 7 years ago, maybe we're in a whole different situation right now. And the one other thing I wanted to add too is when you talk about, we talk about Dan Hilferty being in this spot, and he's, not a guy who has any kind of experience in professional sports anywhere. And you see a lot of fans get really upset about this, right? It's like, wow, they just replaced one suit with another. What I need to clarify for people just, and I hope that they hear this and trust us on this, because this is a little bit different. Dan Hilferty does not have to be a hockey guy in a sense of being a, knowing all the players and knowing who's good and who they should trade for and who they should sign and that stuff. He doesn't need to be that. What Dan Hilferty needs to be and is someone who understands where the Flyers fit in Philadelphia and on the sports landscape. And that is what he is, because he grew up here, because he is a sports fan, and he grasps it and understands it. And from what I understand, people were meeting him at the carnival and really got to, and he really got people excited. Talked to some fans, reached out to me and said, got to meet Dan Hilferty, and wow, this guy is really, really good. Yeah, that's what you want. Right? You want somebody who cares and understands. He doesn't have to be the president who he's going to hire has to be the hockey person. That's the person that you have to worry about. Are they a hockey guy or not? You don't have to worry about if Dan Hilferty is. And that was the problem. Dave Scott was miscast into this role, and for some reason stayed in it for 9 years, which was about 7 years too long. In all honesty. And no, and it's not a knock on Dave. It's more about that was not the original plan. The original plan was just come out of retirement, kind of, keep this together until we find somebody else. And then they never found somebody else. Ed died, and it was just kind of like, they were just kind of wallowing in the muck for several years. And that's what it was. And again, that's not a personal attack on Dave Scott. So what does Dave do? You talked about the Hextall thing, right? Hextall, they thought, okay, well, we got a guy, we got a plan. That blows up because of how he operated. And then Dave then has to step in at that point and be like, okay, I have to take control of this because it's a mess right now. And he doesn't know the sport. So that's when he hires Bill Barber as his consigliere, right? That's when he tries to become more involved. And that was a mistake too. So if we want to start mapping the mistakes and how it got to where it got to, that's what it is. And the guy ended up trying to put himself into a position that he never should have been in to begin with. So that's what it was. So it's, if you find all these little mistakes, it doesn't matter whether you hire another flyer, or you hire somebody from outside the organization. They hired 2 coaches from outside the organization. They didn't work either, right? Dave Haxtell didn't work, right? Elaine Vigneault, other than one season, didn't work. I mean, they now you brought in Tortorella, also from outside the organization. So I mean, yes, were they recommended by Clark and Holmgren? Of course he was. Tortorella was absolutely recommended by those guys, and Chuck never would have hired him. I reported that Chuck did not want him. Chuck said was not on his list. Chuck made a point to bring it up at his press conference without even being asked about it. That, oh, why wouldn't I want to hire John Tortorella? I mean, he was that. He tried to debunk that story so bad that he brought it up himself, okay? The fact of the matter is that he didn't want him. But they've done this. They've gone outside it's like for fans to sit here and say, oh, well, it's just the same old. They've done things differently. It hasn't worked, but they have done them differently. And now whatever they do, I'm sure fans are going to criticize, whether it's someone from inside or someone from outside. They're going to criticize no matter what it is. That's why they just have to get good again, because you can't, the criticism is going to stay and it's going to remain until you become competitive again. But fans need to understand the reality of it. Who is responsible for what, and who has to be the right hockey people and who doesn't have to be the right hockey people. That's all.
This is fun.
I know, Russ, you got to sit back and just let us rant for about 25 minutes there. That was pretty good.
Chuck Fletcher wanted, Chuck
there are a few
wanted
hundred
John
people right now who
Tortorella.
are thrilled with that, by the way. Ant.
Go ahead, Bundy. I'm sorry.
Well, I said Chuck wanted Tortorella to be the coach of this team about as much as I'd want to take a hot air balloon to space.
No, you're right. You're right. Absolutely right. So
I didn't need anyone to tell me that.
The inverse is kind of true. We also need to kind of level on this, though. Like, Tortorella wants to have somebody that he's working with at the GM level who he feels like he can bully. I mean, we just need to call it. This is my personal opinion. All right. Snow the goalie is not responsible for this take. But I don't think that John Tortorella wants to be working with a front office full of headstrong people. Chuck Fletcher wasn't that. And I don't think Danny Briere is that. It's part of why I think that this organization's choosing to go the way they are, where they've decided that they're going to hire, they're effectively going to have their interim GM become their GM. They're going to keep the head coach in place and then try to hire a president of hockey ops, saying these two guys stay. I think it's fine if it works. I think it's fine as long as Briere stands up for himself and for what his front office is going to want to do. But if he's a pushover and like a figurehead GM, just, kind of putting into effect what Tortorella wants, I don't think that's exactly a successful model for a long-term build and for something that's going to be a Stanley Cup contender for, 6 to 8 years. I just don't see that. I will say I'm a little bit surprised that it took this long for big Comcast to realize that a change was needed with Dave Scott in charge. I know Dave Scott had spent, what was it? All things considered, he had spent like 30 years or something working in some capacity for the company, including he had that retirement and then came back. But the last 9 years that he's been in this position, he has almost single-handedly overseen the collapse of this team as an actual entity and something that the mainstream sports fan in Philadelphia cares about. Dan Hilferty, as a mover and shaker, as we talked about when he was first hired, has the ability to turn that around. And assuming that the fan status that he has and that Bundy talked about previously is true, it stands to reason he's going to do everything within his power to make the Flyers into something again, which if you're a Flyers fan, obviously you should care. The one thing that I think we can give Dave Scott credit for is it's not as if he tied the purse strings and said, we're not spending. If the team's bad, we're not spending. To his credit, I guess to Big Comcast's credit as well, this team was largely against the cap for a large number of the years that Dave Scott was in charge. The money was allocated poorly and wasn't used appropriately, but at least they spent. So we'll see. Dan Hilferty takes over. If he and Val Camillo are going to be the two that are going to lead this thing into relevancy, she's done a lot on the business ops side to prove, I think, that she's worth keeping in that position. And if Hilferty's this big mover shaker and they hire a good president of hockey ops, there's a chance that this thing does turn around much faster than any of us could have anticipated. So we'll see.
Well, you got to get the players. So I'm always, like I said, we've been so brutally honest that the team's playing well right now, and I appreciate that. But there is a lot of work to do here. I mean, there is, and there's pieces like well, the other thing too that happened. I love the move. I said it was the young guy at Boston College is going back for another year. I think that's a good thing. Cutter Gauthier. He needs to totally dominate college hockey. I haven't seen that happen yet. At times he has. We've seen bursts of it, but we need to see a whole year where he just owns college hockey and the World Juniors. And then the other part is really, it's he can say, oh, Danny's here. Yeah, just because a guy, I'm in full support of him. But man, there's a lot of things that you have to follow the right way. They got to find a way to get free agents back here again. You got to get somebody that can talk to people, influence, like guys say, hey, this is why we believe in what you come in here. There's not a lot of interest. But every year in Philadelphia, I played an era where it was 12 years. Every year it was like, well, who wants to go play in Philly? That's the way it once was, and it was always somebody coming, you could, because they wanted to play here. So they're going to get back to that, but they have to get players to do that. And that's why it's not like you just have a draft position or it's going to happen. You got to turn that around and be actively moving it at all times. That's what Chuck didn't do. The fact he couldn't get rid of Van Riemsdyk told me he just wasn't doing his job.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see who they bring in as president. I've heard 3 names, all of which have a small connection to the Flyers in the past. None of which are people who have been involved here for any time. I guess the most recent one was, about 15 years ago, right? So that's, it's been quite a while. So I'm going to throw the 3 names at you guys that I've heard. The one that I think is the longest of the 3, the longest shot of the 3 is Robert Esch, who we've talked about before, who is running the Utica Comets in the AHL, which is in his hometown.
I like him.
Yeah, really, good guy. Another one is a former Flyer, Scott Mellenby, who has worked in the front offices of several teams in the NHL. I don't think of him as a Flyer. He did play here. He came up here as a rookie and played here for his first, I think, 4 years of his career, 4 or 5 years of his career, but was mostly, I remember him as a Florida Panther because he played there for a long time. Has worked with the Montreal Canadiens. I think he's with the Blues right now. He's done a nice job with those organizations. And the third name is someone who's not worked here, but is connected here as a famous Flyer name, of course, and that would be Ray Shero. Used to be the general manager of the Pittsburgh Penguins, was with the Devils. He's up now working with the Minnesota Wild. His one son is a scout for the Flyers currently, Kyle. His other son, Chris, is a scout for the Columbus Blue Jackets. So those are the 3 names that I have heard.
I'm good with all 3 of those.
Yeah.
Any one of those 3 I'm good with.
Yeah. I mean, look, Ray Shero's won Stanley Cups, right? I mean, as a general
people
manager.
say, "Oh, it won't be Ray." Why won't it be Ray? Like, I like Ray. Ray's a great guy.
Yeah.
He certainly has the lineage here, right? Like his dad. Scotty's a great guy. I mean, again, and he's not. The Flyer stuff was 40 years ago with him here. Almost.
Yeah.
And then Esche, I love Esche. The thing with Chico, I could call him Chico Esch. He built the minor league team in his hometown, and that might have been an easier sell than taking that script to the big league. But he understands the front office, and he played with Danny in Phoenix.
Yep, they have a relationship already.
So there's that tie. Yeah. I'm good. I don't want to beat a dead horse, Anthony. I'm good with all 3 of those names.
Yeah, no, I think that there are 3 good names to consider. And I know, I know fans are going to sit there and go, all 3 are tied to the Fly. But when you talk about hockey, there's a difference between coming from the same tree and the fact that you could have a connection but maybe not be part of, you look at Andy Reid's coaching tree, right? For example, in the NFL, okay? And you have all these guys who were coaches for him who then became coaches elsewhere, right? Just because you played here doesn't necessarily mean you came from the general manager tree. Okay, just because you were a player for this team, and so that's why I don't look at Mellenby and Esch coming from the tree, so to speak, just because they played a few years here. And again, Ray Shero, his connection just goes back to being a kid when he was here. I mean, his dad was the coach, so when he was with the Flyers, he was just a young kid running around, right? Everything that all the bones he made are elsewhere, in the hockey world. So. I would be good with all 3 guys. And then the last thing on that is that the NHL, all leagues are there's a lot of patronage jobs or family connections and things that happen in sports. The NHL just happens to have it more because it's the smallest of the 4 major sports, right? I mean, so that's why seems to happen more in hockey than it does in the others. But it's a thing. I mean, it's a thing in sports. I mean, you come from somewhere and you know people, and that's how you get your jobs, right? I mean,
it's a small world too.
Yeah.
And the hockey world's a small world, right?
Right.
And that's why I was saying, like, the people like Clark and Homer, I was explaining, somebody's got to carry that water for you to try to make the next pick. And it's not that they didn't make bad picks. I mean, if you think back in 2000, would you have loved Ron Hextall coming here off of 2 cups with LA? Of course.
Right.
Of course. And then, you want to get a guy who, okay, the hockey thing didn't work. What are we going to do? We'll go get the Harvard and Princeton trained lawyers to come and run our hockey team who also know hockey. Didn't work.
Yeah.
Wasn't for a lack of effort, but they had an open mind, and they didn't just go with some dinosaur that everybody says. That's bullshit to say that. I'm hopeful for the future, guys. There's a lot of good things going on right now, but they have to get the players right, because ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what fans want to go watch. A good, qualified hockey team with high-end talent in the first 2 lines and a chance to get to the Stanley Cup Finals every year.
That's a good point.
Russ, you want to wrap it up with, I think we have 4 5-star reviews.
Yeah, but before we do, there's one other news item that came up.
Yeah, I know where you're going with this. Go ahead.
And it's important to talk about. We've discussed it briefly on the show before, and this is like part of my. I went on a little crusade yesterday about unfollowing people on Twitter and removing podcasts from my feed and unfriending people on Facebook. I had this epiphany yesterday. It was after another national tragedy that I looked at my family and I was like, you know what? Like I've got a wife and kids who I love and care about, and the negativity of social media doesn't really jive as much anymore. And so I found a couple of things that I think upset me more than they should have. And one of them was somebody took a tweet that I put out about a situation that pertains to a Flyer, and they, instead of quote tweeting it or instead of engaging in a dialogue, they screenshotted it and tried to blast it, which is like cowardly bullshit. And it happens on social media all the time. But the tweet was about Hockey Canada, and it's something that is beginning to look like it could be coming to an end. There's been a motion to reveal all of the investigative work and I think to expose the names who are tied to the investigation. And one of the players who was on that team, not necessarily one who was involved, and we'll put the warning here, if you're listening with kids in the car, this is not an appropriate conversation because of what the allegations were. So give you a second if you need to turn it off, or but there was the Hockey Canada situation from the 2018 junior team that involved the gang rape of a young woman. And we obviously want to see whoever is involved in that be brought to justice. And this has gone on for far too long without there actually being any kind of legitimate motion or movement on that side of things. Now, on the Flyers side, it could potentially involve Carter Hart. He was on that team. It doesn't mean that he was part of that incident. But one of the things that we had talked about previously on this show, I think a few months ago, when people were talking about, do you look to trade Carter Hart during the season? Do you look to trade him in the offseason? One of the things that has been reiterated, and Anthony, you've heard it, I've heard it, I'm sure Bundy's probably heard it as well, is there is no team in the NHL who wants to, under any circumstances, make a move for any player who could ultimately be part of this situation and part of this investigation. And until they clear the names officially, legally clear the names of any player who could have potentially been in or around that incident, no team wants to even make a move. It doesn't matter how good the player is, which is actually refreshing, if you're a decent human being. But if these names are to be released, if there are charges formally brought forward, one would assume that as long as, Carter Hart is not part of it, that if the Flyers wanted to look to move Carter Hart at some point this offseason, this would appear to be the first time that a team could legitimately look at making that move. So I don't know where you guys are at on this. I don't really think that there's another side to take in this. We all want the victim here to have their time to, their time for justice to kind of play out and for those things to happen. But, and do you think that this is kind of where we're at? If these names are released, if he's cleared, if, everybody's in the free and clear, that we might actually see a potential trade rumor this offseason around Carter Hart?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny to answer you with one word after you go on 5 minutes about it, but yeah, if his name is cleared, I think it's very possible that Carter Hart can be moved. But the question is, we have to wait and see what happens with this investigation. I know that Hockey Canada announced that none of the players who were on that team, and there are 17 of them in the NHL, are eligible to play for Canada at the World Championships this year. So even if Carter Hart wanted to be the goalie for Canada at World Championships, he can't. Yep. So I think it's very revealing that they have taking it so seriously that they've basically suspended these players without saying that, right? That they can't play until the investigation is complete. So I question whether or not this gets resolved in time to make a decision to trade Carter Hart if you wanted to in the offseason, right? If Danny Briere looked at it and said, hey, we need to do this rebuild. We have another young goalie who we like in Sam Erson. Let's see let's maximize, a really good season. And Carter Hart has had a really good season. Yeah. Let's maximize his value and try and move him. I'm not certain that you can until the results of this investigation are announced. And yes, it does seem like it's closer to it, but we aren't that far from the draft and start of free agency. It's only a couple months away.
Who is? I don't want to beat a dead horse here. Who's doing this investigation? Because I know the Hockey Canada.
There are three different investigations.
The Hockey Canada thing to me, and I'm a Hockey Canada alumni from many different tournament stuff.
Yeah,
it's almost a joke. I mean, they have like wives of former people that were there that are now like Cassie Campbell. If you're going to do this, do it right. Don't just do it right. Clean house. Get independent people in here that have absolutely no clue what's going on, like where you're blind to it. But you can't have people coming in that were fucking spouses.
To be clear, you're saying that the organizational structure of Hockey Canada.
It's a mess.
I just wanted to be
just couldn't get the president for the sake to resign. I mean, listen. It's a mess, and I don't want to get into it, guys. I've been reading it and following it and watching a lot of the stuff on Twitter from guys.
It's frustrating. It's got to be frustrating for you.
It is, and I mean, like, I don't know how something shitty happened to somebody, and people need to be held accountable, whether or not they like that or not. Right. That's the way it goes. I mean, there's people up there. You should go read the Canadian stuff. They want these names out. They want the video put out from whatever was out. I mean.
I genuinely don't understand it's taking so long to get to a resolution.
So like, I'm saying, what are they doing? I don't even know what they're doing.
If what you look at here, like you look at the actual, I mean, if you read the report, right? Like this is horrific.
Yeah,
horrific stuff. A young woman's life is ruined, right? Absolutely ruined. And there were far too many people who were involved in that incident, and then who are obviously aware of what happened in that incident, to not have come forward and for this to have already reached a resolution. It's insane.
It's been one cover-up after another, it seems like, from the beginning. You're right. And nobody has the balls or the bag to come out and actually fucking say, here's what happened. Like, apparently there's police that actually know the deal from what I've heard, and like no one's saying it. So I don't know, who are we trying to protect? What are they trying to protect? What are they trying to hide? And what is really at the end of the day, when again, this is just a compilation of stuff I've read and seen.
Mm-hmm.
What is your end result here? Because I'm going to tell you right now, you make decisions in life, you got to stand by those things that you've done. You got to own them. And again, but my concern is, who's the one being protected?
Yeah.
It's not the victim.
And looked out for.
If it were, there would have been something done by this point.
Right.
That's right.
Which is a shame.
1,000%.
So anyway, I didn't mean to make this kind of go negative here at the end, but this is the thing. And again, this is why I'm like purging social media. This is why, because you see people with, I don't know, like some kind of bullshit narrative or agenda or whatever, and they take something that's an innocuous thing without context, without there having been prior discussion about this.
Yep.
And what it does, and this is why I was offended by it, is I think most people in this world know somebody who's been affected by some kind of sexual assault or violence, or has been sexually harassed. And so to take something and then to kind of whittle it down to say, like, how dare you talk about a hockey player? How dare you talk about the potential ramifications of a hockey move without putting a disclaimer at the top of every tweet that's put out about it, without putting a disclaimer. Like, I don't totally follow, but what it does is it essentially, I felt attacked in that moment as somebody who was like, I don't know, not sympathetic to a victim, which is fucked up. Like, I'll just call it Wiz. That's really fucked up. And if you're one of those people, if you're the person who did that, if you're one of the people who, liked that tweet, who retweeted that thing, I'm sorry. I hope you get help. I hope that you're able to find some peace, because that ain't it. And trying to turn that into something is just wrong. It's offensive, and it's offensive to anybody who's known anybody who's been affected by something like that. So get out of your echo chamber, take a moment, get a little macro perspective, get a little bit of context, reach out to the person, perhaps quote tweet the person so that they can engage in a dialogue. You can DM about it. Don't just do something like that as a trying to dunk on somebody. It's awful. It's reprehensible. Honestly, it's gross.
Russ, selfless, shameless plug right here. But I have in the last couple of days, we've expanded some stuff. People knew I was with Pennsylvania Recovery Center, where there are addiction spots. We have 2 of them, one in Fishtown and one in Phoenixville. We have sober living, and we're really treating a lot of people right now. But really, I had a presser out. I put it out on social media today too. I'm now part of a mental health facility, Pennsylvania Behavioral Health Centers. The first one is in Pennsylvania. Is it back out in Phoenixville, and we're probably looking to expand. But I wanted people to know that in this area, as I've always said, it's what I do. Here to help anybody struggling with any kind of addiction or mental health. You can now get a hold of me on any of those social media platforms. We have some exciting stuff starting up. So don't be shy. And I always say the hardest part about getting help is just asking for it. After that, it just kind of handles itself.
Yep.
That's awesome. That's
awesome.
Awesome.
Good stuff. So Ant was excited before this. So sorry, Ant.
It's okay.
That there had been some new 5-star reviews, and there are, and I'm trying to figure out how far back.
I think there's 4.
Well, one is Logan Crackpipe.
Yes, that's the first one.
Logan Crackpipe checks in with a 5-star review.
Yeah.
I don't even. What a name. Great show. But can Anthony be ready for the show on time? And Bundy. Okay. I didn't write this, by the way. I did not write this. All right. Seriously, longtime listener and always a great show with inside knowledge. In this last episode, so this is a few weeks back, we're throwing around a guy's name that manages the Flyers cap for 18 years. That was Barry Hanrahan. Great information, and that's what I tune in for every week. But I will note, I don't think that guy can be a scapegoat. Chuck was the GM, and he has to know you don't give out those contracts like candy. Is the excuse Sanheim's deal was made by the guy, and Chuck blindly said, yep, I need him, and didn't see the offer had 8 years on it? And Sanheim didn't even meet his new coach in Torts yet. This is just plain dumb. Chuck equals dumb. Chuck can't balance a checkbook, and I'm sticking to that. Thanks for the great Flyers content. Bring on 2028.
It's good stuff. Let me throw one thing out there, though. I did hear that, and this isn't the greatest news, but I did hear Danny may keep both assistant GMs if he has his way. I don't know if the new president of hockey operations should just blankly sign off on that, or if that person who is technically going to be above Danny Briere can come in and say, yeah, no, I know you like him, Danny, but we're changing everything. We'll see what happens. So I won't say it's 100% certain, but I did hear that Danny personally would like to keep both.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway,
all right, let's go to the next one. If you like that first name, you'll love this one. Beef Vader. Beef Vader. Bundy. Beef Vader. Like Darth Vader, but with beef. Always entertaining, 5 stars. Big fan of the pod and usually agree with Bundy, but I don't want Clark Barber or Holmgren to have the ear of anyone on anything in the Flyers organization. I don't even want them giving suggestions on the brand of coffee they buy for the break room. I'm 36 and can appreciate their importance to the organization, but the Flyers need fresh voices and a new vision moving forward. The Flyers culture of taking their own is understandably beloved by alumni, but seeing as how we're about to broach 50 years without a cup, it hasn't done anything to help us succeed on the ice. I love all the teams in this city, but I would trade the 08 World Series and Super Bowl 52 without blinking for one Stanley Cup in my lifetime. Keep up the good work, fellas, and go Flyers. That person would give up the World Series and Super Bowl 52 just to see the orange and black hoist the Stanley Cup.
Wow.
That's really something. By the way, they were not responsible for the brand of coffee. They were responsible for the creamer and for there being sugar in the raw as well as stevia. So let's just clear the keep the record accurate there.
Uh-huh.
Next one was from John Messina from this is a Canadian one, Ant. So I don't think you saw
I didn't get this one. So then I guess
yeah, this person doesn't like Bundy. No offense, Bundy, but you know how it is. You leave a 5-star review, we read it on the show. So, a bunch of angry exes. That's us. That's us. Chris Terrian, angry at the world, the Flyers canned him and just goes off on a rant 24/7 over the smallest things just because it's not 2004 anymore. Bundy, it's been 20 years. Get over 2004. That's what this person says. Thanks for the 5-star review.
That guy, it just actually tells you how little that guy actually knows, Anthony and Russ.
And pays attention.
Because he actually has no fucking clue at all. Because if he did, he'd be at home eating his words right now.
That's right.
Right?
I know.
Nobody really knows that, but you'll figure it out one of these days.
Yeah,
that's right.
That's all right.
Thanks for the 5-star.
And then the last one here is from Tom 3-Putt. Tom 3-Putt. It's more than just a game recap. Despite the Flyers' dismal record, I've stayed loyal to this podcast because the guys talk about the culture that made the Flyers one of the elite franchises in pro sports. Coverage is balanced and objective, yet filled with passion that makes Philly sports fans unique. I'm especially happy they covered the 2023 Flyers Carnival on site. It evokes memories of taking my young daughter to the event in 2015. To this day, she still remains loyal to the orange and black, even though we now reside in Georgia. Thanks, and keep up the great work. Thanks,
Awesome.
Great, I love that.
Wasn't there another one about the carnival?
No, well, yes, but that was Lee C. That's the rebranded Lee C.
Oh,
for longtime listeners of the show,
all right,
Lee C is somebody who's passionate about leaving a new 5-star review every week after every episode. We love Lee C for doing it. It might mess up the algorithm. I don't know. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. But Lee C goes on every week and gives the most up-to-date review on the previous week's episode. Lee C reached out to me because a while back I was like, hold on a second. The signing off, the curse of Ron Hextall continues. Thank you for your great work and continued success with the podcast. I saw it and I was like, wait a second, that's his Flyers fan 1953. What the hell is this? And then Lee C reached out to me and said that's me. I had to change my name. So I don't know what's going on over there with Apple in a battle with Lee C. But yeah, Lee left another 5-star review, which is great. Lee, if you really want to help us out, create burner accounts for Apple products and start leaving more 5-star reviews that will show up and just increase that number. But short of that, feel free to keep leaving 5-star reviews. But Lee C was very happy about the fact that we did the live broadcast. And I think noted the fact, and we did talk about this really briefly on the live stream, but NBC Sports Philadelphia did not cover the Carnival live. They didn't carry it a few years ago. I want to say it was the 2019 Carnival was the last one that they had broadcast. I don't know. I'm sure it's not a massive ratings get, but this I think kind of speaks to where things are heading with regional sports networks. This is something that was a no-brainer for Comcast Sportsnet. It's something that even for a little bit was a no-brainer for NBC Sports Philly. You're seeing time and time again now, regional sports networks going bankrupt, going belly up. The Bally's sports networks are all doing it. It's entirely possible, and this is going to make some people sick, but it's entirely possible that in the not too distant future, NBC Sports Philadelphia is no more, and you're going to pay to stream the Flyers, or it's going to be part of like an add-on with ESPN Plus, and that's how they're going to do it. MLS has done it. I know Ant is not the big soccer guy here, but MLS still has some games that are on terrestrial TV, but they've gone off to Apple Plus, where you can buy the season pass for I think $60. You get every in and out of market game, no blackout restrictions. It's a little bit tricky. You don't have the voices that you're used to hearing on play-by-play and color commentary, but it seems to be working for them. I don't know where this is going to go. If these regional sports networks keep going belly up, it's entirely possible that you're going to just see the entire league offered on its own streaming service or as part of ESPN or something. Like I don't know where we're going here, guys, but
maybe somebody should advise Valerie and Dan to bring the product in-house like the Yes Network. They don't need that dumpster fire at NBC Philly anymore. Like they had Al on last night with the Betcast guy. Yeah. If that's not a sign of the times of him and Barkan of what's to come, I don't know what is. But I'm telling you right now, like this is a chance now where I'm not worried for the fans, guys, because I think the Flyers have an opportunity to take that themselves when NBC goes down the tubes, Philly, and to either subcontract to another local station where someone will pick that up at night, or find a way to create your own channel like the Yes Network in a certain way, like the Yankees did where they brought it in-house. The Flyers can do that. They have the ability to do that because they're that kind of a franchise. Maybe somebody's already maybe told the higher ups that maybe that wouldn't be a bad idea. But you know what? Yeah, something's going on that way, guys. It sure looks like it. And it looks like the Bally's may have been the first drop of the dominoes to fall. But I wouldn't worry about that.
The Bally's thing happened because of the Fox regional networks.
Yeah, they purchased them out. Yeah,
it was all trading. It was all changing
profit.
hands. Yep.
Yeah, so it's been interesting, but there's certainly I wouldn't worry if I were the Flyers fans because I actually think this could be a gift. This could be the best thing that happens to the Flyers and their TV product moving forward. Again, Philadelphia's a unique spot, and they'll make something happen here, especially on the heels of what's gone on the last few years. If that circus act fell by the wayside, I think personally, what you don't know might be the best thing for them, and I think that's what might happen with the Flyers here.
Ant looked like he was ready to jump in there.
No, Bundy's right. He's 100% correct. Well,
Yeah.
it's gonna. The only thing I was going to say is I think there was another. Wasn't Time Warner? Wasn't they the other ones that announced that they were getting out of their regional sports? So it's all happening, right? It's all going to.
Well, that's also
NBC
part
might be
of
the last one clinging to it, but I think that they'll eventually have to let go too.
The Warner Brothers Discovery thing has been like an absolute disaster for consumers, and that's just one of the many parts of it. We talked about this a while ago about what's happened with like pro wrestling and the NHL with TNT and TBS and all that, and like we've seen what's happened with HBO Max and things being removed, some movies that were completed not getting released, like that has been a mess. So we'll see. Who knows, guys? Maybe that'll be a topic for an off-season episode if we hear anything on that front. But this might be a good time to wrap up. So, as we noted off the top of the show, and if you made it all the way to the end here, congratulations. You get 2 gold stars this week. Make sure you reach out to Anthony on Twitter at AntSanPhilly for the stickers. He'll send them to your house or something. But as we noted off the top of the show, Anthony's all worried now. As we noted at the top of the show, if you are watching this on the Crossing Broad YouTube channel, that's totally fine. But give us a, subscribe to the Snow the Goalie channel, youtube.com/@SnowTheGoalie, where we're going to, I think we'll be doing more of the live stream stuff over there. And we'll also be putting up the full episodes. If you missed the live stream of the Flyers Charities Carnival, that's because we did it on the Snow the Goalie channel, not the Crossing Broad channel. So if you want to be kept up to date on the live streams that we do, and obviously the full episodes as well, go give us a subscribe over there. You can hit the bell to get notified whenever we go live or whenever a new episode is available. You can hit the subscribe button down below. I'm not going to go through like the whole rigmarole that all these people do on their great content creator channels, but you get it. You know where it's at. And then of course you can find us on your favorite podcast app. If you look just above my head, you can see Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher, Spotify. We're on Pandora. We're on Google Podcasts, anywhere you get your podcasts. And if it's not one of those, if it's like a third-party app, we're on there too. Search for Snow the Goalie or Snow the Goalie, a Flyers podcast. You can follow all of us on Twitter. You can find Anthony at AntSanPhilly. You can find Bundy at CTarian6. You can find me at Joy on Broad. You can find our show, of course, at Snow the Goalie on Twitter and Instagram, Facebook.com/SnowTheGoalie. And of course, that YouTube channel, YouTube.com/@SnowTheGoalie. So for Bundy, for Ant, I'm Russ. Thanks for watching, listening, enjoying Snow the Goalie, the Only Flyers podcast. We'll talk to you again next week. And guys, I think we can say this. Go Flyers.
Go Flyers. We've been saying that all year.